And no one moves a limb, a muscle when Camilla passes. And that was because they were angry with Camilla, and they were furious. And not only that, Kate and William were angry too. And that anger, of course, Harry was angry. That anger went right through that small part of the congregation.
Palace life runs on loyalty, duty, and hundreds of years of tradition. But even those solid foundations can start to break apart. Queen Camilla was reportedly shocked when rumors started spreading from inside the royal household. Staff members supposedly said they wouldn't work for Catherine anymore. Wonderful. Everyone here has done their part. And I'm sure in 10 or 20 years, who knows, we might see the end of it. This kind of defiance almost never happens in the monarchy, bringing up questions about respect, loyalty, and growing problems within the palace walls. But what could have made royal staff take such a bold stand? And how will this rebellion affect Camilla's time as queen? I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anyone except the queen being there. A palace in revolt. Queen Camilla now finds herself in the middle of a storm unlike anything seen in modern royal history. Buckingham Palace, usually a place of perfect order and control, is instead falling apart from the inside. What started as quiet whispers in back hallways has turned into an open act of defiance. A staff mutiny that threatens to shake the very foundation of the monarchy. Insiders say that loyalty among palace servants, once automatic and never questioned, has broken apart. A growing number are refusing to serve the queen consort, and the silent rebellion shows no signs of slowing down. According to those closest to the inner workings of the royal household, the protest isn't random. It's believed to be a direct response to what staff describe as deliberate humiliations aimed at Catherine, Princess of Wales. These weren't one-time incidents, but a series of actions that have left wounds too deep to ignore. The result is a quiet but powerful uprising carried out not with shouts or signs, but with small, ongoing acts of resistance. At first, the signals were almost invisible. An attendant who used to stand ready at Camilla's side would suddenly excuse themselves just as she reached for a drink. A trusted butler of decades would disappear from the room the moment she walked in. Doors that should have opened right away stayed shut just long enough to make her presence awkward. Afternoon tea would show up late. Evening wine would go missing completely. Tasks once done with perfect timing were now deliberately delayed, messed up, or abandoned. For a royal household where service runs like a well-oiled machine, these disruptions aren't just accidents. They're statements. It's a rebellion of 1,000 small cuts, explained a former footman still in contact with current staff. No one mistake can get you fired. But when dozens act the same way, the message is crystal clear. Respect is gone, and without respect, she has nothing. The whispers spreading through the kitchens, hallways, and servant quarters showed just how deep the wound goes. Maids whisper about a betrayal that can't be forgiven. Footmen quietly described the queen consort's treatment of Catherine as beyond redemption, even experienced attendants. Those who had lived through divorces, scandals, and storms that shook the House of Windsor before admitted. This moment feels different. One older royal family member reportedly spoke in a hushed but firm voice. She crossed a line with the princess. There's a line you can't cross. That line, once sacred and unspoken, has been broken, and everyone in the palace knows what it means. Staff no longer need to spell out their reasons. The reference to the episodes with Catherine is enough. No one wants to talk about them openly, but every servant knows the details. The group's silence around these events only makes their importance heavier, feeding the sense that something that can't be undone has happened. For the monarchy, this is more than an internal problem. Senior aides admit that palace operations are grinding to a halt. The environment has turned toxic, and the family faces its most serious internal crisis in a generation. So, how did a single act of humiliation spark whispers of collapse? leaving the monarchy's very survival hanging by a thin thread. Stay tuned. A humiliation too far. To really understand why the palace staff have turned so strongly against Queen Camilla, you have to look beyond the polished image of royal unity and examine the incident that insiders describe as the trigger. A calculated humiliation of Catherine, Princess of Wales. For years, whispers of tension between the two women simmered just beneath the surface. Tabloids speculated about rivalry, about cold glances and hidden remarks. But what had once been rumor turned into open hostility during a private dinner at a royal residence. That evening, meant as a small gathering to show family solidarity, quickly went downhill into something far darker. From the start, Camilla's tone was sharp, her remarks filled with mockery. What began as mild criticism of Catherine's public duties escalated into cutting attacks, aimed at her past and her place in the royal structure. The words weren't careless slips. Witnesses insist they were deliberate, timed for maximum impact, delivered in front of courtiers and family members to strip the Princess of Wales of dignity. Those outside the fancy dining room recall raised voices, Camilla's cool, disdainful, and Catherine's strained, tinged with disbelief. When the confrontation ended, Catherine came out visibly shaken. Her face was pale, her usually calm presence shattered. A personal aide later admitted that the princess left the room in tears. An event so rare, it shocked even those used to the pressures of royal life. To them, this was no passing argument. It was a wound delivered in public, meant to scar. One insider called it for what it was, a planned, intentional humiliation. The purpose, they said, was to remind Catherine of her place, to assert dominance, and to weaken her standing within the family. According to several people present, Camilla's most cutting remark was to suggest that Catherine's position was temporary, dependent entirely on Prince William rather than any merit or bloodline of her own. The words, echoing old insecurities that once haunted Princess Diana, struck deeply. For Catherine, who had spent years proving herself as a steady and respected figure within the institution, the attack represented not only cruelty, but a major betrayal of trust. It was, as many staff members quietly agreed, more than a clash of personalities. It was a battle for the soul of the monarchy itself. Camilla, determined to project herself as the unshakable matriarch, appeared to see Catherine's rising popularity as a direct threat. Each positive headline about the Princess of Wales, each moment of adoration from the public was viewed not as a victory for the royal family, but as a challenge to the Queen Consort's authority. The final straw came with whispers of Camilla's intention to strip Catherine of a symbolic title with deep ties to Princess Diana, for many within the palace. This wasn't about etiquette or protocol. It was an act of erasure, an attempt to rewrite history to make sure that Catherine would never overshadow her. To the staff, many of whom still revere Diana's memory and see Catherine as her natural heir, this went beyond palace politics. It was sacrilege. But how could Camilla dare challenge Diana's memory through Catherine? Was this ambition or desperation? Stay glued. When the curtain was pulled back, if the private dinner marked the spark, then what followed became the explosion. For inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, whispers and subtle gestures of defiance were one thing. But before the eyes of the world, the rift could no longer be hidden. The fracture went public, and the consequences were immediate. It happened at a glittering diplomatic reception. One of those carefully planned evenings where every smile, every handshake, every toast is designed to project unity and British authority to the global stage. Beneath chandeliers that cast a golden glow over the Grand Hall, foreign dignitaries, ambassadors, and senior officials mingled in perfect formality. On the surface, everything gleamed, but in the space of a single exchange, the illusion cracked. Witnesses recall Queen Camilla stepping toward Catherine, Princess of Wales, with calculated precision. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The words, though softly spoken, were sharp enough to slice through the hum of polite conversation. What she said remains guarded, hidden by a palace desperate to suppress the details. But the impact was unmistakable. Catherine, poised and graceful only a moment before, froze in place. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Her composure shattered in front of an audience of international power brokers. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversation stopped, laughter died, and the room thickened with tension. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, each fully aware that they had just witnessed a rupture in Britain's most sacred institution. It was frightening, one attendee admitted quietly afterward. You could feel the temperature drop. For the staff who had long admired Catherine's quiet strength, the scene was unbearable. They were used to her calmness under pressure, to her ability to handle scrutiny with grace. To see her struck down so openly was more than they could stand. As she withdrew from the reception, pale and shaken, a small group of aides instinctively formed a protective barrier around her, shielding her from further humiliation. Their words, whispered yet firm, carried more weight than any official statement. "We are with you, Your Royal Highness. You are not alone." That moment, brief but raw, changed everything. The bond between Catherine and the staff deepened from formal duty into something deeply personal. What had started as professional loyalty now carried the force of allegiance rooted in compassion and conviction. Behind the scenes, the palace machinery scrambled to contain the damage. Photographers were ordered to put down their cameras. Footage was confiscated or buried. Press releases praised the evening as a huge success, filled with praise for Britain's diplomacy. Yet those in attendance knew the truth. The Queen Consort's cutting tone, the Princess of Wales's visible anguish, and the silence that followed couldn't be erased by spin. Prince William's reaction was measured in public, but burning in private. Those close to him say his voice trembled with fury as he confided to advisers that Camilla had crossed an unforgivable line. This wasn't only an insult to his wife, but an attack on the very future of the crown. His vow, made in the privacy of trusted company, was chilling in its clarity. This humiliation would not be forgotten, and it would not go unanswered. And what did the staff's silent defiance really mean? Was it loyalty, rebellion, or destiny rewriting the monarchy's future forever? Keep watching. Loyalty written in small gestures. The palace revolt didn't erupt from nowhere. It wasn't a sudden burst of anger, nor a rebellion fueled only by Camilla's actions. Its roots stretched back over more than a decade, quietly nourished by Catherine's own behavior. Within the strict hierarchy of Buckingham Palace, where staff are trained to stay invisible, their personal lives often ignored. The Princess of Wales had always chosen to notice them. And in those small choices lay the seeds of something extraordinary. Catherine knew the names of butlers and maids, gardeners and groundskeepers. She stopped to ask a tired chef how his children were doing after a long day in the kitchens. She praised young cleaners who scrubbed the marble floors long after the royal banquets were over. These gestures weren't staged for cameras or carefully planned for public relations. They were private, genuine, and heartfelt, felt most keenly by the very people who were rarely seen or thanked. Stories about her kindness spread among the staff like treasured secrets. When a junior maid fell seriously ill, Catherine quietly arranged for soup from the royal cook to be sent to her room, accompanied by a handwritten note of comfort. When a footman lost his father, she didn't simply offer a formal word of condolence. She wrote to the family herself, expressing sorrow with such sincerity that it reportedly moved them to tears. In a world where distance is the norm, these moments mattered. "That kind of thing just doesn't happen," an ex-footman explained. "We're there to serve them, not the other way around." When someone like her takes the time to notice your life, your struggles, it builds loyalty no command can buy. By contrast, Queen Camilla was viewed very differently within those same walls. Insiders describe her as distant, abrupt, and at times openly unkind. Where Catherine eased burdens with a smile, Camilla was known to scold, to snap, even to belittle staff over the smallest mistakes. The comparison didn't go unnoticed. Everyone within the palace understood there was a rift between the two women. But when stories of Catherine's compassion circulated, they crystallized the divide. What once had been a question of duty slowly became a question of allegiance. Tradition dictated that staff serve the crown regardless of who wore it. Yet this time, tradition faltered. Many could no longer see Camilla as the embodiment of the monarchy. Instead, they turned instinctively toward Catherine, the woman they felt carried their true spirit. For the first time in modern memory, loyalty within the royal household broke away from the throne. Staff didn't view their defiance as treachery. They believed it was an act of preservation, a way of protecting the dignity and future of the monarchy itself. In their hearts, they had already chosen Catherine. To them, she wasn't only the Princess of Wales. She was the queen they believed in, the Queen of Hearts. But how did a silent rebellion inside gilded palace walls turn Catherine into the chosen Queen of Hearts? The moment the palace tore open, tensions that had been simmering finally erupted into full view. Insiders say Queen Camilla first tried to ignore the slow, steady rebellion of the staff. But when the pattern became undeniable, she lost her temper. Senior aides were ordered to find out who was behind the quiet refusals. Names were checked, lists were made, and accusations began to travel through departments like wildfire. Camilla warned plainly that anyone caught disobeying orders would face the harshest punishment, dismissal from their post. Those threats didn't stop the descent. If anything, they hardened it. Staff, who already felt hurt and betrayed, heard the warnings and took them as proof that the queen consort ruled by fear. What was intended to intimidate them only convinced more people that the palace atmosphere had become unbearable. The more she pushed, the more determined they grew. A tense meeting with senior domestic officials reached a breaking point. Witnesses describe a scene of raw anger. Camilla furious, slamming her hand on a table, accusing workers of betraying her and the very crown they served. The outburst was so intense that even those closest to her were shaken. It revealed a desperation that had been building for weeks, hope turning to panic as control slipped away. The situation stopped being private when a secret audio of the tirade reached journalists. Within hours, headlines screamed about a royal meltdown. Clips of Camilla's raised voice circulated, and the palace found itself under an intense, humiliating spotlight. The leak changed everything. What had been a circulating whisper among staff was suddenly a public story. And the story made the palace seem fragile at the worst possible moment. Those events were the catalyst for Prince William. For weeks, he had watched in silence. But the public shaming of his wife and the threats against loyal staff became too much. People close to him say he finally snapped. He's said to have barged into a private meeting where Camilla was with her advisors, anger clear in his step. "Explain yourself," he demanded, voice firm and controlled. "Why have you been so cruel to Catherine?" Camilla defended her actions as necessary. She argued they were meant to protect the monarchy's order because she believed Catherine had grown too influential. William wasn't convinced. He called her behavior cruelty dressed up as protocol. His fury focused not just on the treatment of his wife, but on the danger being posed to the staff who had stood by Catherine. The exchange escalated. When Camilla insisted she wouldn't be sidelined, William's answer cut deeper than any public statement. He reminded her of his mother, Princess Diana, and the pain she once endured from the same institution. The parallel hung heavy in the room. "Don't let Catherine suffer the same fate," he warned in a low, blazing voice. His final words were sharp and clear. "No one will be allowed to disgrace my wife and walk away unpunished." That vow changed the tone inside the palace. What had started as a quiet refusal to serve now carried the weight of a household's moral stand and the promise of retaliation from the air. The private fury, the leaked recording, the public headlines, and the prince's pledge all combined to push the crisis into a new, dangerous phase. One where decisions would no longer be made behind closed doors and where every action seemed destined to answer the question, who will the royal household ultimately stand for? And now, with loyalty fractured and silence louder than crowns, whose side will history reveal the royal household truly served? Stay with us. A crown in crisis, a princess in silence. William and I continue to be inspired to see young people like you all here today leading this charge. Being particularly brave in having some of those conversations yourselves. As the storm within the palace grew, the effects could no longer be contained behind gilded gates. What began as whispers of discontent soon spilled into the open, catching the attention of news outlets across the globe. The idea of a mutiny inside the royal household was too dramatic to ignore, and the international press seized on every detail. Conversations that had once lived only in rumors spread quickly, turning into questions about the very stability of the British monarchy. The timing couldn't have been worse. King Charles, still weakened by ongoing health struggles, had stepped back from many of his duties. His absence in the face of the crisis left a void, and silence only deepened the impression that the crown itself was faltering. Commentators described an institution without a strong voice, adrift at a moment when the world was watching closely. For the first time in decades, the monarchy appeared leaderless, fragile, and dangerously close to unraveling. Behind the scenes, diplomats from allied nations began whispering among themselves. In private conversations, concerns grew that Britain's symbolic heart, its monarchy, was in turmoil. Reports of staff refusing to serve on Catherine's behalf. Camilla's outbursts and William's intervention painted a picture of a royal family locked in conflict with itself. The prestige of the crown, carefully protected for centuries, suffered sharp blows as these accounts spread. What was once seen as a model of continuity and strength now looked fractured and uncertain. Through all of this, Princess Catherine adopted a strikingly different approach. Unlike Camilla, whose anger had already made headlines, Catherine chose silence. She issued no statements, offered no public defense, and gave no arguments in her own favor. But that silence, instead of being read as weakness, was received as strength. Her calm composure in the face of public humiliation became its own kind of shield. Observers began to draw comparisons. On one side stood Camilla, portrayed in the media as fiery, defensive, and consumed by palace infighting. On the other was Catherine, steady, restrained, and outwardly untouched by the chaos swirling around her. This contrast couldn't have been more stark. Where Camilla's temper alienated the public, Catherine's quiet resilience won admiration. Her silence wasn't emptiness. It was a strategy. The world saw in her a woman carrying herself with dignity, even as forces within her own household seemed aligned against her. The people responded instinctively, rallying around the image of a princess who endured without complaint. Every day she remained composed. Her popularity grew stronger, while Camilla's position felt increasingly isolated. What began as a domestic dispute had become something far larger, a global reckoning with the monarchy's fragility. The story was no longer just about staff refusals or outbursts behind closed doors. It was about the image of the crown itself, the struggle between two women at its center, and the dangerous perception that Britain's most enduring institution was sliding into disarray. Now, what happens when a single letter echoing Diana's pain threatens to unravel the monarchy's power before the world's eyes? The letter that changed everything. Just when it seemed the crisis within the monarchy had reached its breaking point, one final revelation shook the palace to its core. A private letter written in Catherine's own hand was uncovered by an unknown figure. It had never been meant for the public eye. quietly passed to senior officials, and then shared among key members of the royal household. Its contents stripped away the last threads of authority Queen Camilla thought she held. What stunned those who read it was its tone. The letter wasn't bitter or filled with accusations. Instead, it was deeply personal, a window into Catherine's quiet suffering. She spoke of loneliness, of the immense strain of carrying herself with dignity while facing hostility from within her own family. The words that left the deepest mark weren't political, but painfully human. I only ask for the respect and dignity that everyone deserves. I only want peace inside these walls. The reaction was immediate. Staff who had long admired Catherine were left in tears, overcome by the honesty of her plea. Many drew chilling comparisons to the late Princess Diana, who decades earlier had penned her own anguished words from behind palace walls. To them, Catherine's letter was more than a personal cry for peace. It was history repeating itself, and this time they were determined not to let it end the same way. For Prince William, the discovery only hardened his resolve. Protecting his wife was no longer just a matter of loyalty. It was a duty to shield her from the same fate his mother had endured. The rebellion that had begun in whispers was now impossible to silence. And so the climax came not in the secrecy of back corridors, but in full view of the world at a grand state banquet staged beneath glittering chandeliers and meant to project unity and strength before foreign dignitaries. The revolt reached its most dramatic height. Queen Camilla, standing firm at the center of the hall, sought assistance to complete a centuries-old ritual. But when the moment arrived, no attendant moved. The silence was deafening, a refusal more powerful than any shouted protest. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they had just witnessed something historic. The footmen stood frozen. The aides averted their eyes, and the queen consort was left exposed. That chilling pause transformed the banquet into a public reckoning. Proof that the rebellion within the palace walls had broken through into the open stage of history. And so, when silence replaced loyalty at the grand banquet, was this the night the monarchy's foundation cracked forever? Keep watching. The night the crown trembled. Not a single figure stirred. The footmen stood frozen in their places. The attendants fixed their gaze forward, and an almost unbearable silence filled the grand hall. Then came the sound, a horrified cry that echoed against the high ceilings. As the queen consort of the United Kingdom found herself exposed, standing utterly and publicly alone. Her staff's refusal to act was more than hesitation. It was a declaration, a silent but thunderous refusal that carried across the room. Moments later, the heavy doors opened, and Prince William entered with Princess Catherine at his side. They walked with quiet authority, their composure unbroken. Their presence steady, almost immovable, like a wall of calm in a storm. Every step they took seemed to shift the balance of the room. In unison, the staff lowered their heads in reverence, a gesture that spoke louder than words. It was in that precise instant that a new path revealed itself. The loyalty of the household was laid bare for all to see. Without a single word, Catherine claimed the respect of every soul present. Her silence was power. Her dignity was her weapon. While she stood unshaken, Camilla remained stranded in isolation. Witnesses later described the queen consort's expression as collapsing under the weight of realization, a face broken by defeat. For the first time, she seemed to understand that the battle was already lost. She wasn't only confronting Catherine, but also a wall of staff who had chosen their allegiance. A stepson who stood firmly by his wife, and a monarchy whose future was moving on without her. The crown she had pursued with such determination now felt hollow, stripped of the reverence she once believed it carried. The rebellion didn't end with a dramatic proclamation or a shouted command. It ended with something far more devastating. A silent truth no one could deny. At the very heart of Buckingham Palace, a decision had been made. It was Catherine, not by decree, not by announcement, but by the quiet will of those who served, who was chosen. To them, she embodied the dignity, compassion, and quiet strength that the monarchy needed. And for Queen Camilla, the damage from her own actions had carved wounds that could never be healed. So, what do you think? Was this the moment Catherine truly became the people's queen, leaving Camilla powerless? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.